No, this isn't Groundhog Day. It's just crowdfunding. Hello and welcome to Modern Toy Fair. I'm your host, Mr. Modern Toy Fair, and I am joined by the founder of the NECA Illuminati, the delayer of shipments, the procrastinator of pre-orders, the perfect person, my YouTube wife, Mrs. Modern Toy Fair, Jarmar_Games. But that's not all. I'm also joined by the man known as Bearded Spice, the man Optimus Prime popped and he refuses to stop, the man on Modern Toy Fair has full custody over. The Twilight Knight, the Master of Mac, the three-pump jump of taking the show off the rails, the man with too many titles, Nate.
What
just is
happening? What is happening?
Finally decided where I wanted to put the Bearded Spice one, and it fucked everything else up.
Well,
Even your name takes this show off the rails.
I try. When do we talk about Taylor Swift?
When?
Which time?
Yeah, what part of the show?
Oh, tonight?
Oh, we can start now. Yeah, we can just right now. Go ahead. So, what do you have to say? What are your thoughts?
Yeah.
I think she seems like a really nice person.
Yeah.
Fair.
I was thinking the same.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I think she's great. Seems like a wonderful person. Her new beau seems like a wonderful guy. I hear he plays the footballs. That's cool.
Yeah.
It's really cool. Yeah, her movie's blowing up.
He did pretty good for me in I was gonna say in Final Fantasy. He did pretty good for me in fantasy football last week. So I mean, I'm a pretty big fan of hers. Now,
how great would it be if like his Final Fantasy
summon
camaraderie? His group is like called the Kansas City Chiefs, and he's got Travis Kelce as his wizard.
That is.
I don't know any of the players. There's a Mahomes guy.
Yeah,
Mahomes,
there's a Mahomes.
Right? That's a guy.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Moving from someone who doesn't need crowdfunding to a bunch of people that apparently do. This week we are discussing the fact that everybody in the toy industry seems to really want to do crowdfunding, and it keeps doing worse and worse, it seems. So we recently talked about Giantman when it first got announced.
Does it do worse and worse?
I mean, it seems like it. Like, there's some properties that consistently do well.
It,
but it feels like everyone who jumps on the bandwagon, it does well at first, and then progressively just starts to not go well for them. And Hasbro's a different beast just because it has 6 different projects from 6 different teams. Currently we've got Giantman. Mm-hmm. We are at the time of recording, 2 days away, and it's.
Is it 2 days?
I think it's this Friday, yeah. So I think it's 2 days away. And last I checked, it was only
that's not good.
It was just over 6,000 backers. So it still needed about 40% more to the other way to get to the backed fully. And don't be wrong, there are a lot of people who jump on late, at the last minute. It doesn't make any sense, but to each their own, I suppose. But it's not looking good.
We've definitely had,
at this point, in past projects, I do feel like if they haven't gotten closer by now, it usually doesn't back. So
yeah. So at the time of recording, 5 days.
Oh, it ends Monday, not Friday. Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Continue on. I have thoughts, as we all do, which is why we're here.
I need to go. Let's jump into your thoughts because we'll talk about Super 7 and a few others here momentarily.
Well, I still think this is going to hit. I do.
Really?
I do. It's got 5 days to go. We're at over 6,000 backers. This has been a long one. This has been a drawn out one. I will be shocked if it doesn't hit, only because I was thinking if it was 2 days away and we were still at 6, that would be a problem. But I think we're going to start seeing a genuine climb, because you're right. Everyone does wait until the last minute for whatever reason. It really makes no sense in this particular case. So I do think we're going to hit it, but I don't I don't know if we're going to blow away all the stretch goals, but again, I'm not necessarily again because I haven't brought it up, or I did on a previous show because we've done these before. I don't know. But the Ghost did almost, I want to say, like 6,000 to 7,000 in the last few days.
Mm-hmm.
So it went way beyond.
But it also backed very early on in the project.
It did. It fully funded, and then it was all the stretch goals. But the stretch goals were like, I think the final stretch goal was 17, and I think it did over 23. I think I'll have to look, maybe see, and actually have some actual data.
Here's my thing with that though. The Ghost had that popularity. It had like people wanted it clearly, hence why it backed so quickly.
Yes.
Giantman doesn't seem to have that same response. Like people oddly enough,
this is true.
People oddly enough are like, oh, 200 is too much, but they're willing to pay 200 for that shitty old Build-A-Figure that's a third of the size.
That makes no sense. But that I don't understand. But whatever. That's just an anomaly in upon itself that people are bizarre with.
Yeah,
they'll bitch and moan about how much something costs, and then they'll go out and spend that on the secondary market for something similar, but not
worse, something that's not even the same quality.
Right.
But yeah, past projects that were in similar scenarios, such as Hellcharger and the Black Series Rancor, they did not. They almost, but they did not quite get there at the end of the finish line.
Right.
That's what I was curious if you had like the information on, I guess the two major ones that didn't go through. Like where were they?
Yeah, the two biggest flops
at this point
were essentially those two, and both of them like they got close, but there wasn't enough of an influx there at the end to really push them over to get there. And I feel like this one, the stretch goals aren't really the enticing part of it, which could be why a lot of people aren't doing it because they've gotten so used to being like, well, if I don't get all the stretch goals, I don't want it.
Right.
But at the same time, just in general, I don't see that excitement like I did for the Ghost. The Ghost, I saw people talking about nonstop.
I definitely don't see the excitement. I also don't really see the negativity. People are like, Giantman,
which I think is worse.
They're not bitching and complaining. It might be. It might be. Apathy might be worse on it. However, I will say that this is a successful program because the Haslab is supposed to be, hey, if you want this, put your dollars behind it. And ultimately, some people have decided that it's not. And we've recapped multiple projects that didn't end up going through, but I also think that might not be a bad thing because they can go back and relearn from this. I would have thought that they would have learned a little bit from the Hellcharger, and I think they did go in a completely different direction with it being a full figure instead of a vehicle, a lower price point, things like that. But again, the excitement wasn't there. I don't know, that Giantman was necessarily the route to go. We all kind of thought we were going with, Quinjets or, diorama pieces or something, something along those lines.
I never thought that. I think they might do those eventually, but
shut your mouth. I did.
I felt like they were going to pivot back to what the bread and butter's been. The bread and butter for Marvel Legends has been giant figures.
Well, they just did
they did Sentinel, they did
Galactus.
They
gave you the Giantman.
But I'm saying like that's what worked for them in the past. Like those are the projects that got funded, so they'd go back to that before they'd try another vehicle when the last vehicle, failed. So I didn't think that we were going to get a Quinjet. Diorama piece would be cool, but they haven't set like any sort of ground level for that in the 6-inch lines for them.
No, they haven't.
I think what we was coming from is I think we were just kind of like spitballing like what would work,
or what we'd like to see.
Yeah. But I kind of like, I don't know why, after like 6 times or 10 times, this is the 20th episode we've done on
I don't know.
crowdfunded?
Probably a
At
lot.
least 30th. I don't know why I never realized this, but yes, Nate, you're 100% correct. If it didn't fund, is it really a failure, or is it just an example that, like, yeah, we don't want this, and that's literally what the program is supposed to be about, right?
I agree and disagree. Only
I mean, I'm
just-
sure they want all of these to get made.
For sure.
Yeah.
The intention is for all of these to get made, but
wouldn't it be a bigger failure if Hasbro was like, yeah, I know everybody wants these. Let's just do a full production and let's put them on the shelves at Target and no one buys them. You know what I mean? That's to me a worse fit.
Then they'll be on the shelves at Ollie's.
Yeah. For half the price.
For $25. But yeah, I just think that is a better. It's a thin line because I know where you're going to go, Michael, because you're going to say, well, if these don't keep getting through, they're just going to stop the programming entirely.
I don't think they'll stop the program.
I just think, to me, I think a knee-jerk reaction would be to be like, you know what? Screw this. We're done. We're only doing this for G.I. Joes because that's the only thing that seems to, is successful. But like, I kind of deep down think like, okay, cool. We didn't waste a bunch of money on this. People don't want this. We hear them. I mean, like, as much money as they would have if they actually did the tooling and everything to make a wide production and ship them to the stores and everything, and then they become shelf warmers or whatnot, and then they become super rare in 10 years, and everyone's like, man, I really wish I had that Giantman, sort of situation. If that makes sense.
Which is exactly what would probably
would happen. Yeah, no one wants it. They go to Ollie's and
I think we're focusing on, yes, the Hell Charger didn't do well, but that was the first Marvel Legends that didn't do well. They previously had Galactus, and they previously had the Sentinel, which one of them, I can't remember which one, was and I still think is still the most successful Haslab. So
maybe maybe Galactus, because I think the Sentinel set the standard of like, oh, if you buy a bunch of this, it'll be worth money after.
Right, and then everybody bought a Galactus.
Did, and it's like, well, now it's not worth anything because everybody bought them.
Right, and then you have every single one of the Star Wars Vintage Collection ones have been big successes. The G.I. Joe ones have been the Sky Striker was the only one that wasn't a massive success. It still funded. It didn't hit all of its goals. It hit a lot of them. But the classified stuff has just been crazy. The Transformers stuff has done extremely well. So, I still don't think that we're anywhere near where we're in trouble yet with Haslab. But I do think these teams really do need to take a look at what was successful and what wasn't. And as much as I don't agree with it, the project should stand on its own. It has to be something that gives people more figures. And I think it's more than anything, it's a feeling of, it's the ultimate in like, no, I'm not that. It's not really quite FOMO, but it's that feeling of having something special that not everyone has. And when you have special exclusive figures, like, I'm not gonna lie, when those figures come from the Ghost, I'm gonna have 4 carded figures that only 21,000 people have. It's kind of cool. And yeah, 21,000 is a lot, but still, that's pretty darn cool. It makes you feel special. You were able to get in on something that is, a neat little thing. I mean, having the barge is a big one for me because we went in on that one early on. We took a chance. We'd never done Haslabs before. There's not that. There's only 8,000 of those in the world, and it's pretty cool. Yeah. But with so I still think that the program has huge viability. It's just that they have to remaneuver and figure out what it is that makes them successful.
I agree. They definitely need to recalibrate and figure out what to do. My biggest fear is just from a sense of these teams probably also have input from, the corporate level who comes down and is like, well, you guys are fucking it up, so let's do something different or something like that. That it might, the failure might not lead to the correct, like, lesson learned kind of thing.
I think that obviously they have bosses that they have to report to, but I also think that the highest level of Haslab is, I don't think, on their radar, to be honest. I think they're more worried about shipping out Play-Doh and,
That's Hasbro?
Candyland for Christmas.
Well,
Yeah,
I mean, you're not wrong, but at the same time, if that was true, then we wouldn't have had all of this bullshit initiatives over the past couple of years where they jacked up prices 30% higher and they got rid of the plastic packaging retail. Briefly, thinking that they could get
retail. We're talking about a Hasbro Pulse Haslab exclusive. I just don't think that those fall under the same umbrellas.
I just can't believe that a company would let a team invest as much money as they have to invest in making these prototypes and paying all the employees who are working on them, wouldn't be heavily involved and invested in it failing or succeeding.
Again, if every single one of them were failing.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, now Marvel's could potentially have two
in a row,
but they have two huge successes. So what is it about those failures that they can learn from? What can they take from the vintage collection? What can they take from Star Wars? The Star Wars vintage collection, and I meant to say G.I. Joe. So, yeah, I think that's where we're coming from. I also think Hasbro seriously needs to, again, look at their timing, and I think this is with everyone.
Mm-hmm.
Now, at least this time around, they waited until the previous project was done, but there was a couple years ago that there was like 4 of them kind of running over each other, and that was rough. But if you were a Hasbro fan, this last month and a half, if you kept all your pre-orders, this was just absolutely ridiculous with the amount of stuff that was either charged or shipped and charged. Because I just look at, if you're a vintage collection fan, you paid for the Ghost, and then like a week later, the Boba Fett throne shipped, and we got charged for that. That was another $220 on top of the $500 that we just spent for the Ghost. And then a bunch of other stuff came out. There was a bunch of Marvel Legends that came out around that time. There was a bunch of Transformers that have recently come out, and I canceled a ton of pre-orders. And I still had shit show up that I was like, this is crazy. And, you just had, because I want to talk briefly about Super 7, because, they launched their G.I. Joe crowdfund or whatever they're doing, or their pre-orders.
Cobra ship thing.
Super Labs.
Right. It's really cool. It's really awesome. And if you're a fan of the cartoon, especially, it's really cool because that's where it comes from. But also, to me, it's showing that the market has left 3 3/4-inch Joes. They introduced potentially Super 7 is going to do O-ring. Mm-hmm. They offered up one of the things as an incentive in their campaign that these figures are going to be O-ring figures, not the typical 5 points of articulation reaction, but going back to the O-ring style of the Hasbro 80s G.I. Joe figures, which a couple of years ago, I think would have been met with great enthusiasm. But with the fact that Classified is going as strong as it is, people don't want to go back now. Yeah. They've moved on. They've stuck with their vintage. They had a whole early bird incentive, and after almost a week, they've only had 700 backers to theirs. Wow. And I'm not going to do it. I'm right in that wheelhouse. But one, it's $495, and I think it might be worth it. Seeing it and the dimensions and things like that. But I just don't have another $500 to drop on something like this.
Yeah.
I did that with the Ghost, and I just don't think, sometimes I think these companies don't understand. Yeah, we have disposable income, and yes, we still want to buy this stuff from our past and blah, 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 but we can't get it all. And that is a huge problem.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they really also should read the room.
I just feel like everything is we're super big because it's justifying these, crowdfunded things that you couldn't put on a shelf, but also all right, well, I bought 6 of them, so I don't have any space anymore either.
So you brought Super 7, which is great, because I wanted to talk about them and Mattel, because both of them saw Hasbro's success with HasLab early on. You're like, oh, well, let's just copy their homework. That seems to be doing well. And, at first, it went really well for them. Mattel had Motu item that they did, right? Or is there two of those?
Well, they did. Most recently they did the Eternia.
Did they have another one before that?
No, I don't.
Okay,
I
so
don't
it's just
think
Eternia.
So for like a crowdfunding one, no.
And then they had the ultimate new generation WWF WWE wrestling ring, which did pretty decently well, and they decided to continue. Well, then they decided to do the WCW Nitro stage, and that did not go well at all for them. And then they tried that terrible Jurassic Park playset, which definitely didn't go well for them. And then we've got Super 7, who had, the giant Thundercats castle base thing. And that seemingly is going really well for them. Like, people seem interested in it, and I'm pretty sure
it's done.
It is done, right?
Done.
Okay, I couldn't remember.
Yeah.
And it funded, right?
Yep.
Okay. I thought so.
Yeah, I don't think it hit. I don't think it hit the last tier, the last stretch goal, but it funded.
I thought it got a couple of the goals. Yeah.
Yeah.
Which, I mean, seeing it in person, it was incredibly impressive. Like, good on them. But now they've tried this thing with G.I. Joe, which I assume is a mix of, like, this is probably something that Brian Flynn wanted as a kid and never got. So he was like, this would be cool. There's got to be other people who want it. But like you said, Classified is so hot, and now that Hasbro is willing to make in-scale vehicles, and those vehicles don't have to be like too massive, because the original line wasn't like in scale from where you have like a tank that had several seats in it and stuff. It had that one seat in it. And so like they don't have to like worry about that like you would with the Hell Charger or other vehicles that need to be realistically in scale of the line.
But they are making them better though, because both the Haslab G.I. Joe vehicles are bigger, and you can hold a bunch of soldiers in the back, and the airplane or the helicopter has 2 pilot seats. And
like, I'm not saying that they aren't making improvements and making them bigger so you can do those things. I'm just saying in general, like, they don't have that constriction where they have to make sure that it's like a true 1/12 scale fucking helicopter kind of thing. Like, it can be kind of off and still work, because G.I. Joe fans were used to that as kids. And like you said, like, they're even like trying to hit that nostalgia with going with the O-ring figures and going back to that old school look. But even didn't Hasbro try to bring those back like a few years back, and it failed? So before they did Classified.
I mean, putting aside like the obviously like longevity and durability of those, I'm surprised that, like, when I initially heard that, when you mentioned O-ring, because I didn't know this was happening, but I thought, oh, that sounds cool. Like, someone, obviously from the outside, but I'm just shocked. Is there a reason that that's not, I don't know, exciting? Or is it just because you're like completely into like the 6-inch, so you're like, eh?
It's a little bit of both. I mean, we have had 3 3/4-inch G.I. Joe figures from the very beginning. So you had them from 82 to 94, and then they came back in 97, and then they came back again. Then they had the 25th anniversary, and the 30th anniversary, and the 50th anniversary, and all these things. And yeah, we've had so many. I just don't. I think for the most part, most of the current G.I. Joe collectors who are still buying figures have moved on to Classified. Is there going to be an O-ring audience? Yes, they're the 700 people that are backing this thing and wanting it, but is there enough of them?
Right. That's fair.
It's a concern, because I mean, you guys know I'm a big G.I. Joe fan. I buy a ton of G.I. Joe stuff, and I saw that thing launch, and I went, "Oh, that's really cool." Even before I saw the price, I was like, "That's really cool." It's not for me at this point in my life.
Sure.
And then I saw the price and I went, it's absolutely not for me right now. And I'm not even saying it's overly priced. It might be totally worth it, but I'm just not doing that again
right
in the same well, it's not quite the same quarter, but we're damn close.
Yeah, because it
Same.
has 54 days left, right?
Mm.
From the time of recording. So it's got almost 2 months, and it's gonna have a long 2 months to get there. Like, it's not impossible, but like
I also wonder a little bit because, Super 7 has always done this. They've always done, these quote unquote made to order. Now we can
that's something
talk
I'm
about
glad
that
you
term all we
mentioned
want.
that, because that's weird.
Yeah.
That's their entire business model.
Well, so they've always had to hit a certain threshold, and that was the same for at the time when Mattel was doing Masters of the Universe Classics. They always had to hit a threshold in order for things to go into production. Now, previously, they didn't used to tell us what that was.
Mm-hmm.
But now, because of things like Haslab and Kickstarter and things like that, it's become this whole show. So why not make it a whole thing where you have to hit tiers and these dates and these times and things like that, where they had already done this to begin with, because like for instance, the Power Ranger figures that got canceled, they didn't meet their pre-order threshold on those. They just never told us what they were, or that and had a cool graph on the website to show us. I think even with Snake Mountain, I think they did have like some sort of graph, but I don't think they ever actually said what the number needed to be to go into production. So
do you think that?
But now that this is part of it.
Do you think that maybe that is hurting, like specifically like this project? Like, do you think that maybe because it has those tiers, if people don't see those tiers as value, that now they're not going to invest in it, where if it was just the figure on their website for, let's say, $50 less or something like that, because it doesn't have to worry about the production value of the tiers, it may have gotten more than 700 backers so far?
I mean, it's very possible. It's very possible that it could hurt it, because we just talked about it. People will wait to see if all the tiers are hit, or if it's even going to fund. That's the one that I don't understand. That all people are like, well, I don't want to contribute to its funding until I know it's being funded.
Yeah.
Please make that make sense. But and when they see it's not hitting, well, I'm not going to put my money into it, even though I'm not putting any money into it until it goes into production. But whatever.
Yeah.
But yeah, I do think, like, in a particular case like this, it could be hurting it.
Yeah, because I feel like that's Hasbro's biggest problem. The thing that defeats them the most is people have become so accustomed to the stretch goals, and the value in them has to be, enough to get them to justify the price for the main product, which is not the correct way to look at this.
Right.
And I feel like if you do that, and you fail that second part there, and people aren't interested in that, the project's dead. So if you just didn't do it, everyone already knows who is balls deep into the Super 7 pond at this point, knows that they'll cancel stuff if it doesn't meet the threshold. So you just pre-order it, and if it gets canceled, it gets canceled. But that would open the door for people like Big Bad Toy Store, who may put in orders at that point because they get a little bit, off the top to make some profit, versus having to crowdfund it and then try to charge more later, which, in the way things are going for these giant, massive products they're putting out, unless it's something insane like the Ghost, they aren't flippable anymore. They aren't pulling in all of this extra money like they were when they first started doing it,
because too many people are getting them.
Yeah,
and we're diluting that market. So if you're buying it for profit, which you shouldn't do, then you're hurting things. You really shouldn't, unless you're a dealer. That's one thing, but
it doesn't really benefit you to do that either, because by the time you pay for these, you're spending, let's say it's $600, you're spending almost $700 after taxes and shipping, which means you have to sell it for almost $800 to try to make a profit off it, and no one's going to pay.
And that's a very small return.
For something that's going to sit in your shop
for a year.
Yeah.
Well, like they're gonna have your money for at least a year. I
At
mean, you're
least.
better off probably just putting it in a shitty CD. You could, I mean, depending on how much money you have, you could make $100 off that before you will,
Depending on who the
investing it
artist is.
into.
Yeah.
Right.
I just had to say something.
Well, I mean, probably if there's anyone under the age of like 25 watching this, they're like, what is he talking about? What does financial CDs have to do with music? What's a CD?
That's true.
You'd be surprised. CDs are like allegedly making a comeback.
Are they?
Apparently, that's like
they're just. I mean,
apparently they've moved on from the hipsters and the vinyl.
I don't
now
like
Gen
this.
Z is liking CDs because they love everything in the 90s. And
I don't
like
like it.
I saw a few things saying that like CDs are slowly making a comeback, and like that's
they
dumb.
are, and everything will. But at the same time, I just saw so many things about so many companies discontinuing physical media in their stores. So
Well,
right, like Best Buy's like no more movies.
I'm not even doing the
Yeah.
whole digital future thing. CDs were not good audio quality. Like they were above like cassette, but they weren't great.
Yeah.
So I understand why you would want a vinyl because you are getting more uncompressed sound. But not
Also,
a CD.
CDs get scratched easily.
It's like one of the worst. Also, and they're finite.
It was convenient. It's convenient.
Sure,
Yeah.
but like
Small,
to bring it
not
back.
anymore.
Portable.
To bring it back.
No, not
This
anymore.
Yeah, like back in the day, it was great.
At the same
But
time,
in the
Yeah.
current world of
At the same
technology,
time,
it's
though,
pointless.
But vinyl records are, and this is someone who coming from someone who has a ton. They're extremely like, what's the word I'm looking for? I'm forgetting.
Collectible?
Not easy to deal with.
Oh,
Sure.
They're
But
a huge pain in the ass because you got to
you
take
can't-
them out. You got to make sure you don't touch them. You got to make sure you have a nice turntable. You put them on there. You got to make sure there's no static. Make sure you clean it. Put the arm on. Drop the stylus down, and then you listen to it for like 20 to 25 minutes, and it sounds great. Then it'll end, and then you got to get up. You got to put the lever up. You got to turn it over. You got to do the same shit to the other side. Plus, you're not even talking about the initial cleaning when you get them, because you got to clean them, because even when they come brand new, they've got crap on.
Oh, so funny thing is, I the people I've known who actually do collect vinyl, aside from Ukes, I've never seen anyone do that when they play their records.
Well, I'd secretly
And are they
collect
playing
some.
it on some sort of
even play
shitty
them.
record player? Like,
I mean,
they're not.
they've got one that's like maybe like $100. Like it's nothing like incredible, but like it's not like a shitty $30 one.
Then they're doing themselves a huge disservice by not properly listening to them. But that's a topic for a whole nother show. Okay.
My point is CDs sucked, and we're looking back at them with rose-tinted glasses, especially in this.
But I mean,
Don't bring it back. I'm just saying, like, don't bring them back. They were good for what they did at that time.
Jarmar,
But don't
people
bring
are
them back.
bringing back VHS. VHS was the worst.
Yeah, who's bringing that back? They need to stop.
Gen Z.
Dumbasses.
Stop.
It's not even Gen Z. It's Gen X. It is Gen X because people like, especially in the horror community. Oh, it looks better on VHS. Fuck off. It does not. Just because that's the way you watched it when you first saw it doesn't make it better. You can't see shit.
No,
But
you can't.
But I know this isn't the podcast. In some cases, that might be better because you see like a movie that's like remastered for 4K, and you're just like,
yeah,
"Oh, this is gonna look amazing." You're like, "Oh God, this makes me
the special
uncomfortable."
effects.
You see where the production value was,
yeah.
and it was not in that.
Yeah.
So there's a tiny bit of truth to that, but overall, you're an idiot. Now that we offended everybody,
Overall, you're an idiot. I like it.
But yeah, CDs like don't last forever either. That's what I meant. Like you can't collect the CD because over time you'll start to lose like not its memory, but the way it's like the data is put on the disc will start to
It's
like
laser rot.
Yeah, it'll start to
It starts to break
depreciate.
down.
Yeah, so like
Yep.
you don't want to use that as like a long term.
I'd hate to
format.
break up this wonderful conversation about something that has nothing to do with toys on the Toy YouTube
You
channel.
started it. You
I
mentioned
literally just
CDs.
said I didn't expect you to go into a fucking 5-minute tangent about CDs just because I said that they're bringing back
You
stupid shit.
don't know how much I hate CDs.
But I do want to,
I
before we
didn't know
close
that.
out,
That's
I do
bigger.
want to cover a couple other things. The main one is what for these ones that seem to be like floundering. what do you think is the problem? Like, what's the solution? Like, looking at Giantman, looking at this giant Cobra ship, like, and it's assuming Giantman didn't fund. Obviously, people watching this year in the future, we don't. Let us know in the comments below. But currently, it's not looking good. Like, it's possible, but it's got an uphill battle.
This is just a complete, I'm throwing it out there because we've mentioned things before. Could like cutting down the amount of time that it's available to add like that, this is special, like you got to get on this right away. So for like the people that are like, oh, well, I'll just wait until it gets closer. Like,
but then you push out people who need a budget.
But you're not paying. You don't pay for these up front, correct?
You pay for it the day that the day it funds. You pay for it.
Yeah, when the campaign ends, you pay for it.
Yeah,
I just assume they charge you like when it ships.
No.
Okay.
No, not for Haslab.
No. Haslab. The whole point of the crowdfunding is that you're funding the project. So
sure.
Literally, it hits that final day. If it funds, then the next day you get charged. So
allegedly.
So realistically, there's no, like, if you do that, you're going to cut out people who can't, redo their budget for a $500 spaceship in 2 paychecks time. So while it's only one extra paycheck, realistically adding the extra 2 weeks, it still gives them a little bit more time to readjust. I get where you're coming from, though. Like giving the FOMO of it, like, hey, you got to get on this right now, or you're gonna miss it. I just feel like that's you're towing a very dangerous line. Like, you make it potentially more limited.
Maybe not a lot longer, or maybe saying like, all right, instead of saying we need this amount of backers, they could say it in this way of like, this is as many as we can do, or something. I don't know. Like, if we reach a certain amount, then we'll open more. Or something like that. Like, to be like, we need 8,000, but like,
I mean, that's not a terrible idea. Being like,
trying to think of like,
you get rid of the tiers, and you're just saying, if this, like, we're putting this project up, we're only gonna make 8,000 of these. If we sell 8,000 of them, it gets funded and we go into production. If it doesn't, it never gets made. Like, that would be a way to bring back the limitedness of it, to go back to like where you were. But then you open the door for flippers and scalpers, which is...
I don't think limitedness is going to make it successful per se. Because I think that's just going to piss people off.
I just know, like, it gives you special. Like, that, like, like you said, I'm a part of the chosen ones.
Yeah, you literally said, like, a big part of yours, where with, like, the 2 Star Wars ones, is that you're one of the only people who has it.
Right, but everyone had the chance.
Mm-hmm.
Sure.
So I think it's wrong to limit the chance of people.
That's fair.
If you didn't do it in a certain amount of time, that's on you. If they're only selling 8,000 and a bunch of people swarmed it and you just weren't ready, I don't think that's fair.
Okay.
Because then you do run into the flippers and stuff like that. And that's one of the things, because I don't believe you can scalp a crowdfunded item, because everyone has equal opportunity. If you don't buy it for whatever reason, I'm sorry, that's on you. But you can't get mad at the guy who did buy 3 because he has a higher limit on his credit card. Yeah. That's really it. It's not because he was faster or beat you to it and is creating a demand. He just happened to have more room on his credit card.
I'm just wondering, now that Jarmar kind of pointed that out, what if that is the reason? Because these limits are so high, like you have to hit 10,000 for it to get funded. Mm-hmm. And I don't think the other ones were the other projects always at 10,000. I thought they were closer to 8 before, weren't they?
The
skiff was 6. Sail barge
was 5.
5. So like they keep pushing the goal line further down, which I think hurts it as well. And
I don't disagree.
I feel like that's the big thing, is like a lot of people got invested in Haslab because they saw the investment in the product, because of how much the...
I also think, though, that that's their way of controlling the price, because if they're able to create more units, they're able to get more and maybe create for less. Because when we originally heard about the Ghost, the strong rumor was that it was going to be $650.
Mm-hmm.
and it didn't come out as that. And I think then they created a much larger threshold to hit. So, and I don't know that for sure, but from everything that I've watched and read and learned about it, I think that is what the issue is. And you got to take the good with the bad there, I guess, because it does potentially decrease the price.
Mm-hmm.
You just have to sell more of them.
So then is there
just
a
right answer?
more exclusive figures?
Yes.
Yeah.
I think if Giantman had come out with a 6-inch figure of Ant-Man, I guess, or
See, I keep hearing people bitch that it's not Ant-Man and the Wasp. They want the classic versions of them. Which I feel like at that point, Hasbro has already said that they don't want to put it in the project because they want to be able to make them down the line.
Sure.
But
so make a special repaint version.
That's what like.
But here's
put them down the line later, but have a special different color one or have a special version of it. I do think having a 6-inch version of that particular Giantman is a missed opportunity. Mm-hmm. I think that right there would have helped.
Yeah, that 100% would have been like an easy one that they could have done. My concern is if you make the figures like must-have kind of situation, like all the other ones weren't. Like you had the Heralds of Galactus, which weren't the end of the world. Sentinel came with the
Galactus.
Yeah, but like,
right. Like, I'm saying that they're not super important unless you have a Galactus.
They're not so important unless you give a shit about those characters, because you may want a Galactus, but you don't necessarily care about the Heralds. You may just want him to fight your Fantastic Four.
Right. My point being, though, is if you're going to have Heralds, and
they're going to be with
no one really wants a Herald without a Galactus.
I know. I'm not saying that the reverse. That's different, though. That's different than Ant-Man and the Wasp.
Right.
That's my point.
It is different, but what can you add to it? And I say special decos or special versions of those characters. Give them something, because look at every one that was going to be successboob. Like the Hellcharger started to move a little bit when they introduced Mephisto and Satana and things like that. It wasn't enough, and she didn't have the proper underboob for some people. The same thing with the Rancor. Once they started throwing out figures, things started moving, sort of. And honestly, people think of that one as a huge failure. And while it did fail, it failed by only 500.
Yeah, it got
so
close.
For it to make that strong comeback, it really did come close. And I do think it is the power on those figures. Now, do I agree with that? No. I have said from the get-go, the project should be on its own. However, that is the creature they have created in all of this.
Mm-hmm.
That's how they got super successful, is they started throwing in extra shit, and now that's what people want. And when you don't give them that extra stuff and those exclusive figures, whatever they might be, they don't want it. So, maybe it's a Skrull Janet or a Skrull Hank Pym.
Even just deluxe versions of a bunch of accessories.
That's what I was just gonna say. Do accessories, maybe a swappable head with the different expression.
Because we know the ones in the main line are going to come with one hand each and maybe a spell magic-y effect.
Yeah. So
we solved it again.
But yeah, I do think it lies in exclusive figures.
Yeah. I agree. Would you like? We are running out of time here. Would you like to read off the Patreon?
I do.
Especially because I think it's a hefty one this week.
Oh. It is a little hefty. Yes.
Ooh, has to take a swig of the drink.
All right. This is from our patron, Suck My Taint. The Marvel Legends team makes strange and unfortunate decisions. First, the Haslabs is too big. 15 inches to 18 inches would have been a better size for the average person to display. Galactus and Sentinel are huge, but make a crater piece for a display that people will build shelves around due to popularity. Second, they include no figures. They claim people were upset about the Ghost Rider Haslab having desirable figures. People are upset because they held Mephisto and Goblin Queen hostage behind the Haslab, saying if it doesn't fund, the figures will never be made. Third, there is a lack of associated figures. The Black Widow figure that is displayed in every Giantman promo pic is a Target exclusive that was impossible for many figures to get at retail. Not true. I saw so many of them at $11. I'm sorry.
It's also in the Toy Hunt video.
In spite of it showing up in the Modern Toy Fair Hunt video. No, dude, I saw so many of those. I could build a house out of them. I swear to God.
So I was gonna be nice, and I went back to that Target because I was gonna pick it up and offer to like send it to him, and I went back and it wasn't there. So I was like, well, oh well.
I just figured he would have got it because they were everywhere.
No, he's consistently complained about that figure for the past like month every time we mention Giantman.
Whoops. They also haven't announced a first appearance Wasp or Hank Pym. They hint they are coming. The only logical reason why they wouldn't show a Wasp or Pam is because they are too far along in the process, and it turned out like poo-poo. And if they show them now, people will be less excited for Giantman. If they wait until after Giantman funding ends, people will buy the poo-poo figure even if they are disappointed.
Are you done or are you proofreading?
I'm just looking. I disagree with some of the things. I don't think that they're too big. I think that's the whole point. I think
I do too. Like if you go smaller, then it might as well be a Build-A-Figure.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. It has to be a dream thing. It has to be in that dream item. And for a lot of people, that Sentinel was it. And I think for a select group, I think the Galactus was too. I think that just there's too many people that bought it as a potential flip that are giving the impression that it's not a desirable figure when it really is.
Yeah, I agree. But that's going to be it for this video. So let us know in the comments below what your thoughts and feelings about the Giantman is. Let us know if it funded or not, because obviously we don't know yet. And as always, like and subscribe helps us out, gets you tutorial content in your feed. If you're already a fan, you can go over to patreon.com/Modern Toy Fair. Link in the description below. We have a bunch of different tiers of different rewards. You can check that out. You can check Jarmar out over on TikTok, Jarmar_games. Nate, what you got for us?
Well, I think it's gonna hit 11,726 is what I'm thinking.
Well, let us know if Nate was right.
Yeah, and check out Jarmar and I's new podcast, Format Talk, where we talk about all the different formats of physical media and their limitations and why they suck.
I can't wait to bring back hit clips.
Oh my god! And that note, hopefully see you next week. Same toy time, same Toy Fair channel. Thank you for watching.
Nothing like
to do it now.
All right. A huge thank you to our Patreon members. Is that what it is? Are they members or are they followers? Sukma Taint, Kibby, Jason Millar, Tavin Hernandez, Aaron Samples, the 45th Lyric, and last but not least, Christopher.